Bonnie Raitt, it's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
It's in preparation for talking to you today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your career. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this new tour, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about activism. But I started out by listening. The record I knew of yours, which I thought was your first album, was Give It Up, and that was the album that I found myself so kind of taken with a few years ago. And then I look up and I find that there's one I didn't know. There's an earlier one, a self-titled record from 1971. I want to play a little bit of it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Woke up this morning, I'm feeling around to my shoes. You know by that I must have had them walking blues. Woke up this morning, people, I'm feeling around to my shoes. Well, you know by that I must have had them walking blues.
How good is that? I didn't want to catch you off guard there by that, but
I just can't believe how fast my vibrato was. The whole thing sounded like, when your phone goes to 1-2 times the speed, the podcast, and you slow it back down. If we slowed that down to like half that, then I could maybe listen to it.
Well, you love Joan Baez, and you sound a little like Joan Baez in your.
Oh, I was pretty young.
Yeah. And I hear Son House on that. I hear Fred McDowell, who I knew you loved, and I hear Joan Baez there. When did you know? Well, first off, what do you hear when you hear that? Like, what comes to mind?
Well, I heard that we do it. I do it much slower than that.
Yeah.
And much funkier than that. So this was just 21 years old and really excited, and my voice had that kind of young sound, which I tried to beat down with cigarettes and Jim Beam and hang out with all these old blues guys to try to get my voice lower and older. And finally, by the time I was 40, it kind of hit. So I hear the passion I had, and I just remember that session. I remember the hand clapping and the great Junior Wells on harmonica.
I was doing a lot of research for this, trying to figure out your kind of origins, and as far as I can tell, it kind of starts with, well, Bonnie Raitt, who talks about who your father is, the great Broadway actor. It talks about the musical family you grew up in. It talks about how you were playing in the folk scene in Los Angeles. But I can't find anywhere that says when you knew that the slide guitar, the bottleneck guitar, was for you. Do you recall that?
Oh, well, my first exposure to country blues was a record on Vanguard, which was Joan Baez's label. She was the queen of all things, like the Beyonce of her day.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Queen Bee was Baez. And it was called Blues at Newport 63, and I was 14 in 64, and that's when I heard it. It had been out for a while, and that's when I heard bottleneck guitar. And young John Hammond was on there playing slide, and I went on, when you're 14, you don't have a lot of income, and I just ended up reading a lot of sing-out magazines and there was no internet, so I just had to rely on, in Los Angeles, just if I could get copies of Broadside magazine or this or that and read about my blues heroes, and I listened to more and more Bottleneck, and I just fell in love with it. And Robert Johnson's record was a big hit in the mid-'60s.
These days, I mean, if it was now, you could just go on YouTube and look up, tutorials on how to play like Son House, how to play like Robert Johnson.
Exactly. Or Little Red Rooster by the Rolling Stones was probably one of the first electric blues that I heard. And then I heard Muddy Waters, and so later I heard Fred McDowell and Son House. But slide guitar is really easy because you can tune it to open tuning and just move the piece across the neck, and it's like an auto harp or a lap steel. My grandfather played hymns on a Hawaiian lap steel.
Oh, really?
So I think that's when I learned how easy it was. But the sound of the single string vibrato, like violin or any of those monophonic kind of sounds, really echo the human voice, and that's why why it got me.
All the artists you just mentioned, Muddy Waters, John Hammond, Fred McDowell, Son House, they all have a lot in common, but there's also one thing they have in common is that they're all men. Did you have any idea how groundbreaking it was that you were playing this instrument in such a public way when you started?
When it would get mentioned in reviews or interviews, but other than that, I didn't think about it. You just like certain kinds of music. I didn't think about whether I was black or white or a female or a male. I just liked the sound, so I was just playing for myself with no feeling about going into it for a line of work. And it wasn't until I got reviewed where people said, this is really unusual.
And how did you feel when they said that to you?
Well, it's fascinating, but probably as interesting as finding out why somebody that was the daughter of a Broadway singer from L.A. fell in love with country blues. It's just, like John Lee said, it's because it's Indian, it's got to come out.
Yeah, I was thinking about Ramblin' Jack Elliott once said, It doesn't matter where you come from; it only matters where you're going.
Exactly.
Which I always liked as well.
Exactly.
I want to play. I want to talk again about your tour. I want to talk about the new record, but I want to talk about the idea of a signature song, which we were speaking with Katie Lang about that recently, about the idea of the importance of playing those few songs you have to play in every set.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing this is one of them for you.
If dreams were thunder and lightning was desire, this old house would have burnt down at a long time ago.
I think the greatest sin you can commit in public broadcasting is fading that song down.
Oh.
Tell me,
Gotta do it.
That's Angel of Montgomery. Angel from Montgomery.
From Montgomery,
Yeah, from
yeah.
Montgomery. I got that written down wrong. Bonnie Raitt singing a John Prine song. When did you first hear that song?
John and I were starting out to get some national press right around the same time. I mean, I think his first record was not long or right around 71 when mine came out. Mm-hmm. So I was playing the Gaslight Cafe and he was playing the Bitter End. And we both were invited in 1970 to the Philadelphia Folk Festival, and that's when I heard him sing.
And did you know immediately that you would do a good job on that song? Why that one?
Well, Hello in There was a great song, and I know Bette Midler had already cut that and was really, associated with that tune. And so I thought Angel from Montgomery just immediately appealed to me as the other one I would have recorded, and I've been singing it ever since.
Well, I asked Katie Lang how she feels about still singing Hallelujah after Leonard Cohen's passing, and she said, well, it's kind of my signature now. I kind of have no choice but to sing it. I have to sing that in Constant Craving.
Yeah.
I've had guests in here who have those songs that have to be performed at every single concert pretty much. Some of them have a great relationship with them and look forward to singing them. Some of them are very aware of the burden or very aware of the expectation, and they become an albatross.
Yeah.
Where's
well said.
Where's Angel from Montgomery for you?
An honor and a treat every night. I sing it differently. I make it on purpose that it's going to be different. And I watched my dad do performances 8 shows a week of Pajama Game or Carousel, and every show was different. And I watch people I really admired breathe new life into these songs every night. So it seemed like a natural thing to do, to just accept that you're going to make it new every night. And so it's never that, and I Can't Make You Love Me and Something to Talk About are probably the big three that if I didn't do, I would get so much guff from or whatever in the internet. The trolls would probably come out, although I don't read that kind of stuff. But I really don't mind because I sing them different every night.
I never thought about that before. Given that your father was a star on Broadway, perhaps you, more than other people, understand the expectation of doing the same thing sometimes.
Yeah.
Because that's what he did.
And yet, if you asked him, did it feel like you're just doing it by rote and going through the motions? He never phoned it in.
No.
So that was the greatest gift he gave me, was make every night opening night.
Another great gift he gave you was your voice. And in doing research for this, I was surprised to see that there was a time when you weren't as pleased with the sound of your own voice. Is that true?
Well, I never listen to my records except when I do something like this, and they'll play a little bit. And
Yeah.
when I make them and mix them, I'm really spending a lot of time making them as natural as possible and not fixing things and just letting all the little warts and stuff show, especially because as a blues singer, you don't want to clean it up too much. Mm-hmm. But it took me probably 20 years before I could stomach listening back and go, I actually think my voice and the key and the way I'm phrasing goes with the kind of music, especially when it's in the bluesier or rock and roll realm. I feel like I'd gotten some age and some gravitas, and even now my keys are lower. Mm-hmm. Some of my keys I've lowered as well.
So you needed. I was going to say, what was the turning point? But it was sounding like the songs in some ways.
Yeah, I think it was just sounding. When I sing Walkin' Blues when I was 21, I mean it just like I do now. But when I hear it back, it doesn't. I don't think a lot of people like their own voice.
No, unless you're in radio, and then it's all you got. I want to play a clip from a moment that was 20 years after that, and it was an interesting turning point in your career that I want to ask about. Just take a listen to this.
And now the album of the year, Nick of Time. I can never get over this as long as I live. Dad, Mom, this one's for you, and it'd be given by Ella Fitzgerald and Natalie Cole. I am so transported right now. I thank everybody so much. It means so much to the kind of music that I do. It means those of us that love R&B are going to get a chance again. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Oh, it made me tear up hearing that.
That's from the night you won 4 Grammys, 3 of them from your 1989 album, Nick of Time. Yeah, you were shaking your head. You're tearing up. What do you hear when you hear that?
Well, it's just like it just happened. I'll never forget it. You know, it just was such a surprise to me above all, but I think everybody else. I don't think anybody expected that to happen. And again, to get it from Ella Fitzgerald and Natalie was just really powerful for me. It was a year, I think, within that year, and then in the next album, there was a year when Lyle Lovett won country male, Katie won female country, Aaron Neville won the male, either R&B or pop, and I won the female. I mean, when would that ever happen again at 4 kind of non-mainstream artists that don't sell buckets and buckets of albums? Even though we had kind of hits, it still was remarkable and only was possible because it's the Grammys, not People's Choice or American Music Awards, where I've yet to be nominated for anything because it's not the public voting. So I just was really grateful. And as I said, grateful that I got it. That night I said I was grateful that it came. I was brought to it at an age when I could handle it.
Well, that's so interesting to me because I think that was a turning point in your career, and I see this. I saw a lot of narrative. I read a Rolling Stone article from just after it came out, and it was talking about how, this is the renaissance and this is the comeback of Bonnie Raitt. But I'm guessing that you felt like you had never left.
Oh yeah, I mean, I never doubted that I would not be able to make records again with my name on the cover, and that I'd have to form a all-female band or something. I just was when the end of a marriage or the end of a relationship with a record company, when it fizzles out, it's time to move, and they did it kind of unceremoniously, and I think that in some ways people had a residual affection for me, and when they voted for me, they were really happy that I, made some lifestyle changes, and the style of music I was doing, there was a little bit more room for that. And I switched record labels to a label that actually really cared about me, and they had something to prove. So there was a lot of things that lined up that year, but still, what an incredible surprise to win Album of the Year. I didn't ever expect that.
The 4th Grammy you won was a record you did with John Lee Hooker. I had Colin Linden on the show a little while, and you know Colin.
Big fan.
Hometown boy from Toronto here.
Exactly.
And he had, when he was about 12 or 13 years old, an opportunity to play with Howlin' Wolf or to meet him. His mom took him to the Colonial.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that legendary place.
And Howlin' Wolf's upstairs, and his mom got him out of school.
Get out of here, that lucky guy.
And he got to play with Howlin' Wolf. If you don't know Howlin' Wolf, he's one of the greatest, blues performers of all time.
And a huge guy, intimidating presence.
And he said that, I asked him how he felt about those people. And he said, Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker and Taj Mahal, all these people he was so fortunate to meet. He said they're like mountains. Is that like we all end up just driving around them.
That's a great way to put it.
How do you feel about, you also had a rare opportunity to meet so many people who, to me, someone who's born in the late 80s, these people might as well be Mickey Mouse. These people might as well be fictional characters. How do you remember them?
And yet it's so great that there's so much YouTube footage on all of them.
Yeah.
All of our influences, and in your Celtic music line, you can go back and see footage of people that you didn't even get to see, and while they were living. It was an incredible gift to me to be able to tour and be respected and accepted by people that I just grew up idolizing, and they lived up to the dream. There was very few exceptions. Not, where the person was dignified, had a great sense of humor, a sense of perseverance and resilience, and just can you say badass? A badass.
They're badass. And
they were as badass as people, and meeting them and performing, and they were kind and generous. It was just a great thing to be able to be friends as well as see them played and learn from them in person.
And they were workers, too.
Yeah. They
They played 3-4 shows a night. They played these dingy clubs. And even when they got to be playing Carnegie Hall, and even when they got to be playing these big shows, they worked. They cared so much more about their audience. Like I spoke to Robbie Robertson about this, and he said, "I just understood that to those guys, the show was the thing. It was the most important thing."
Well, let's talk about the reason, because they never got any royalties. They have to make their gig pay for itself. They were often booked in their later or middle years. They were booked too many nights in a row and had to do too many shows for too little money, and that there's an institutionalized mistreatment of a lot of rhythm and blues artists. I can't speak for country music artists, but people did not get royalties. So they had to make it on the road, and they didn't have a choice of how many sets to do. So later, when we came along in the 70s, we're like, oh, we can't play more than,
Yeah, I can't play more than 2
we're
nights
not
in a
going to
row.
play 5 shows a night, and we're going to get paid up front. And a lot of people like Magic Sam and Freddie King and Wilson Pickett, idols of mine, passed away early. Luther Allison from health problems because they were overworked.
Speaking of this mistreatment, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I was also thinking a lot about guitar culture. And the word you see so much associated with the modern marketed electric guitar, the Stratocaster, is a god, the gods of the guitar. And you see these festivals, and you see these magazines, and you see these documentaries, and it's Jimi Hendrix, and it's Jimmy Page, and it's Jeff Beck, and it's Eric Clapton, it's Albert Lee. Don't get me wrong, all incredible guitarists. But do you think that guitar culture has a masculinity problem?
Oh, I just think it's probably a tradition of it being, mostly a male. The club scene was a very male-oriented kind of. I won't say the lyrics lent themselves to. It was kind of guy-driven. I mean, I think the guitar too, harmonica, guitar. But there were great women pianists in the blues, and there were great. Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Memphis Minnie were great women guitar players. But in general, electric guitar tended to be male blues guys leading their own band. And Barbara Lynn plays guitar. And it was kind of a male-dominated thing, but you don't have to be a guy to play well.
Yeah. And
you just historically kind of went any more than you have to be black to be able to play blues.
You were the first woman to get a signature Fender guitar line.
Yeah, and they offered it to me when I had some record sales in the early '90s, and I understood it would be a great role model thing, but I didn't want to hawk product, And then I realized that I could raise a lot of money for charity if I did it.
Right.
So we paid for 200 clubs in underprivileged but disadvantaged communities in the inner cities to have free guitar lessons, where there'd be 12 acoustic guitars in the Boys and Girls Clubs for kids to come after school, and it paid for teachers to come 3 times a week. So even though those kids don't know who I am, at least they have some access to musical instruments like we all did when we were growing up. We just never thought that the schools would stop having music programs.
But it was also, Bonnie, it was also groundbreaking, and it was also groundbreaking to be. Did you recognize that as the first?
Oh yeah,
woman to
I thought
get
it
that
was
line?
really great. But again, I didn't. I thought it was great to donate the profits to the program. I wasn't really out there to I mean, it was more like an honor than it was, and an inspiration to other young women. So even now, when I run into people that said, "Yeah, I started playing guitar because of you, and I saved up my money to buy one of your signature guitars." So I feel pretty proud.
I want to play another one of the big signature pieces you talked about, and this was the source of a lot of the success that came in the '90s. And when we were coming in, I just heard people. How people. I saw, we're interviewing Bonnie Raitt later. I just have people whistling this randomly at the
Nice.
photocopier all day. Take a listen.
Laugh just a little too loud, stand just a little too close, we stare just a little too long. Maybe they're seeing something we don't, darling. Let's give them something to talk about. Let's give them
That's Bonnie Raitt singing Something to Talk About.
And I'm happy to hear that. It made me feel good. It was a funky record, wasn't it?
It was. And you said to me, I never get to hear this anymore.
Well, I play it every night.
Yeah,
but
when do you ever listen to your own records?
I don't listen to the own records, and I'm still they really hold up, so I'm proud.
And a lot of slide guitars showed up in records after this came
Yeah,
out.
there was a lot of, especially I don't play country music necessarily, but country music got very I mean, it was always a honky-tonk side of it, and slide guitar was always on a lot of, the Allman Brothers and stuff like that, but there's a lot of this kind of groove happening after this was a hit, which made me really proud.
I've read you once said that people only think you play country music because of your hair.
Yeah. Well, I had 2 songs on Urban Cowboy, which was a huge selling record.
Right.
I totally forgot that until a journalist said, well, it started out when you had those hits on that big selling record and people thought you were a country artist. But yeah, I mean, my hair is like a country artist.
That song was written by Shirley Eichhardt.
Yes.
From New Brunswick, a Canadian songwriter wrote something to talk about. Shout out Canadians listening to this right now. How did you come across that song?
She sent a cassette along. People know that I don't write all my own material, and so I'm always kind of putting the word out. And they figured out how to reach me. Either I think it was Warner Brothers. I wasn't on Warner's.
Yeah.
It was at Capitol at the A&R department, or they found my management office. And I had the cassette in the car with stacks of hundreds of them. I have them all over the house. And when I'm washing the dishes, I have a little blaster there, and I play. And I audition, 30 seconds of a song, and I can sort of tell. And this was an unknown person. I didn't know she had records on Capitol and was, recording artist in Canada. Mm-hmm. I just popped it in, and my God, every single song on the track was like 90% better than everything I'd heard. And this song was so catchy. I didn't want to call her the number on the cassette, handwritten cassette, until I knew that we were going to cut it, because I'd had this problem before where I told somebody we were cutting their song after Nick of Time, and they went and bought a car.
Oh, no.
And then the song didn't make it. No. So I vowed not to do that again. But when we knew that the song was cut and it was going to make the record, I called the number, put the phone up to the speakers, and said, "Hey, Shirley, it's Bonnie." And I pushed the button. And it was years later than from when she sent it to me. And then I hung up. I said, "Here, you can," and I gave her a number to call us back.
Oh, that's incredible.
She was I'm sure she didn't even know if I ever even got the tape.
What a huge song. Did you feel like your life changed after that song came out?
Yes. Well, I mean, Think I'll Love and Nick of Time.
Yeah.
Really opened the door, because I think the New York Times wrote and Newsweek wrote an article about how unusual it was to have someone write a song about aging, and that it was, and then just telling my story was an interesting kind of a comeback story to them, which would, in many ways it was an entrance at 40 for a lot of people never even heard of me. So
it's another bit of a comeback story going on right now. The latest record came out last year. You released it after taking a sabbatical, and you had a couple of rough years there. You lost both your parents, your brother, and a close friend, and you haven't stopped really since that Walking Blues record we played first. You've been kind of consistently on the road, and you finally stopped and took some time and thought about things. What was that like?
Well, actually, the time when I took it off was before the previous record,
right,
before Slipstream,
yeah.
and I had a series of illnesses in my family. My parents were in their early 80s or mid 80s, and my folks died within 7 months of each other in the mid-noughts and aughts. Yeah, they went not in the aughts. And my brother was spending the whole decade fighting brain cancer, and he finally succumbed in May 2009. So I was devastated from dealing with all that while doing 2 album cycles and touring, which we usually do two years. And my really great friend Stephen Bruton, singer-songwriter. So I took 2010 away, and I didn't come back until I was ready. And that hiatus to be able to grieve and process after having to work and deal with all that illness. I mean, people out there know they're going through it. At this age, your parents get older and pass away. But my brother's brain cancer fight was really brutal, and he was heroic in lasting that long. But I had to take some time away. And when I came back, I felt really revitalized, and I made Slipstream, and that came out in 2012, and it was so well received, and won Americana Album of the Year, and the tour was just a blast. I felt didn't have to worry about people's illnesses, and even though I was still grieving, I was not devastated. And so when I finished that 2-year tour, I was really ready to come back and write some songs of my own.
Well, I guess that brought the question to me of why did you go back? I mean, you're at the point now in your career where you would be forgiven if you spent the rest of your life in your home in California.
How boring.
Looking out the backyard at the trees, having a drink and a soda water, a cup of coffee. you know.
But I love this. I mean, don't you love doing it too?
I do love doing it. I do
don't
love
want to
doing
give it up. My dad did it till he was 86, and look at BB and Tony Bennett. I have no interest in retiring, and it gets really boring after a couple of weeks at home.
Yeah, I know. What
You know, at
mean,
night
yeah.
you go, what? Yeah, dinner, and what? Do you want to watch a movie? You want to read a New Yorker? I'm going, this is it? You know, I love being on the road. I love traveling. My dad loved traveling. I do not want to give it up. I mean, all my folk and blues heroes and classical music and Broadway people stayed on the road until they dropped. So, and I feel a responsibility to not only my band and crew, but the causes that I support that, you know, really never more than now are going to need funding.
I want to talk about that right now. This is a track from the latest album. This is The Comin' Round is Going Through.
Why bother checking? The facts will be down. It's how you spin it, it's part of the plan. Well, I'm here to tell you, honey, that the second round is coming due. Oh, it's a long,
Thank you for playing that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I'm so glad to talk to a musician.
Oh, I'm glad we got a chance to talk. This is The Comin' Round is Going Through from Bonnie Raitt's new album, Diggin' Deep. You've had you've been an activist as long as you've been playing music. You've political causes, charity causes, humanitarian causes have been important to you. I know you spoke in favor. I don't want to say you were supportive, but you spoke in favor of Bernie Sanders in the last American election. Obviously, things turned out very, very different.
Oh, yeah, it was my birthday. The election day was my birthday. I went on stage with reading a card in my room that said, "For your president, I'm giving you the first female president of the United States." And I came off the show to get ready for the encore, and I looked at the faces of my crew, and I went, "What happened?" They told me that Trump had won, and I went back out and sang "I Can't Make You Love Me" and told the audience. It was like the end of the last date of a 9-month tour. That was how we ended it.
You said something interesting earlier. You said that it's never been so important for you to support the causes that you support. What do you mean by that?
Because they're raking the whole environmental regulations and banking regulations and women's rights and poor people's, you know, ability to get health care. On every level, what's going on, if it passes, it'll be the most devastating rollback of everything that I've worked hard to get in terms of human rights and protection of the environment and inequality, bringing up the level of people to clean air and water and food and the right to health care. You know, these are things we just thought were never going to be threatened like this. So when I say, you know, people are coming out and getting back on the road to be able to raise money for the groups that are supporting to turn that around.
I saw a sign at the Women's March this year in Toronto, and it said, "I can't believe I'm still protesting this."
Yeah.
Does it ever feel that way?
Exactly. I mean, you know, it was never a slam dunk whether the Keystone Pipeline or all the other fossil fuels relics, you know, that's steady. That's been a battle that's going ahead. But the good news is that clean energy and solar and wind are just leaving America in the dust, and even China, you know, is taking steps to roll back the coal dependency and all that. So we are taking a huge step backwards, and those of us that have been fighting for these issues and never had a clean win, there's systemically stuff wrong with the way that America's working, and we have to change the system and get campaign finance reform and get money out of politics, and that's what Coming Round is Going Through is about.
It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you.
I have to ask this. I was reflecting on the first album up until now. I can't even begin to fathom how different the music industry is. I mean, these days, young songwriters are growing up never needing to go to a record store, being able to get everything online, individual songs. Young artists are not understanding what it's like to sell 23, 25 million albums, because that's just never going to happen because we're streaming all of our music now. You broke a lot of ground, as we said, for Americana performers, and kind of the idea of an Americana performer kind of came around you and John Prine and a couple of others. You broke ground for female musicians, especially female guitar players. If a new young artist came up to you now looking for advice, what's the one truth you could still say to them that would be universal, that you've learned that would still be meaningful to them?
What a great point of view to ask that. I would say make sure you get incredibly wise legal advice before you sign anything away, regardless of whether we don't get royalties enough from streaming and all that. Just really line your ducks up in a row and don't get excited by the shiny, bright offers, and model yourself after somebody whose career is measured and being 3 or 4 records in are still holding the course.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's Ed Sheeran or, you know, the poise and the smarts with which Adele and Lady Gaga and Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran and so many younger artists are running their career. They're getting really good teams of people around them, and they're not getting ripped off, and they're not getting sidetracked by blow all your money on this. And I mean, not that it's certainly going to happen, but I would tell people to just really align yourself with really wise advice before you step ahead.
Bonnie Raitt, this has been such a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Dan. God, I'm thrilled to be playing your country again.
I'm happy to have you.
And it'll be really tempting to not go home.
We'll stay here. We'll get you a
Thank
cot.
you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Bonnie. I really
you.
appreciate that.